Hi, and welcome everybody to our Sunrider meeting that we're having on Zoom. This is our fourth in May 2021. We've been doing 4 Thursdays in a row. We did Nourish, Balance, and Cleanse, and talking about New Plus and Quinary and Calli and Fortune Delight. Today, I have a really special guest. And his name's Jim Pendree. We've known each other about 25 years now. And he along with Trudy are the two people who have influenced me the most, and Randy too. Randy's on the call. But Trudy introduced me to Sunrider, and then we were able to go to Jim's home for meetings at least twice a week. And I was always fascinated with the digestive diagram that he did. And he told us how he had started out doing that, which I'm sure he will tell us now too. But it helped me understand how important our digestive system is, and it also how it related to the Sunrider foods and how it can make it life and death changes in your life. And I'm so happy to be able to introduce him today, to be doing this live for all of us. And it's a privilege. So Jim, take it away. Let me know when you want me to do screen share. And at first, could you just tell us just briefly your background and what brought you into this, and anything else you want to tell us, please.
All right, perfect.
Thank you.
Well, I started in eating Sunrider in 1985, and my wife's health hadn't been that good, and she had eczema and suffering from a bit of anxiety and stuff after our first child, and I'd always had even from the time I was a kid, I remember eating Tums. Of course, Dad always had Tums around by the bushel, right? And because he always had a digestive issue, and so going forward, 1985, I was 25, and we heard about these foods. And so my digestion, and I was tired, and there was times I was really kind of foggy brain too. And I didn't realize it at that time, but that was food sensitivities. But anyways, that's kind of how we heard about it. And then Wanda's cousin had sent her up some information about regeneration, about the body could heal itself of anything if you fed it the right raw materials. And within reason, not adding, you're not going to grow an arm back if you have cut off, but your body could regenerate itself. And so I believed in that philosophy as soon as I heard it, and it made complete sense to me. And I didn't know if this Dr. Chin guy had the goods or not, but we were willing to try it, and we did. And it really made a difference. And I started off with the beverages, and it was sleeping better, mental clarity. And Wanda started, and her eczema actually got worse for a little while, but it's like eczema doesn't land on your body from outer space. It's kind of comes from the inside out. It's an autoimmune condition. So as her body went through a cleansing, of course, it got worse, and then it started getting better. And so we were really impressed with everything that was happening to our body. And I love talking with people. And so we started telling other people about it, and people were asking us, well, you guys look really healthy. Like, what are you doing? And so we'd say, well, we're eating these foods from China. we didn't know what to say. We were just like, well, we're eating these foods from China. And anyways, other people started on the foods too. And so we started collecting kind of a nice following of people. And we just talked about this regeneration and nourish, balance, and cleanse, and get on it and stay on it, on the basic foods. So there were some things that really started to show up. And by this time, we were reading quite a few books because we were trying to figure this whole thing out, this healing thing. And I won't even list off a bunch of the books, but there were several of them anyways. We were like, oh, that's interesting. And I remember this one time, this is just kind of a side comment, but I was telling Randy about this report I picked up somewhere, and it was about yeast and parasites and stuff. And it's like, if you listen to the report, it was like it was going to take over the planet, and we were all going to get consumed by parasites and yeast. And it was like, I was gasping because it sounded so bad. And I told Randy about this, and Randy's like, let me see that, right? And he's kind of rifling, through this stuff, and he finally shows a picture of the author of it. It's this really big, overweight guy who got this terrible complexion. Randy said, so would you listen to someone who looks like that? And I thought, yeah, that's a really good point, right? So you can't believe everything you read. And so anyways, you start putting together these ideas that work and don't work. And one of the things that was always kind of puzzling to me was that when it comes to digestive issues, if they got on the Sunrider foods, they just seemed to get better, right? It seemed to work pretty quick. But when it comes to nervous system problems and things, it took longer.
What?
Or maybe it didn't totally correct. And so, there's just some things as a lay person, as you're trying to figure this out, I always kind of wondered. And then we wound up going to Vancouver for this Healthy Living Expo. That'd be, I don't know, probably 2 years later, at least, or 3 years later, after we got started. And it was really interesting because there was several speakers there that one was, I remember, just like major vitamin therapy, and one was all about juicing, and they all had their thing that they were talking about. And this one seminar that was coming up, it was hour long or hour and a half long. It was by this Dr. John Mattson, and I think it just said death starts in the digestive system. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a good one. And so I went in there and I watched his explanation, and I was fascinated. I had more hair than I have now, but whatever I had was straight back, and it was really interesting. And he just explained kind of, it all starts in digestion, and then it starts moving through the body. And I'm going to draw that out for you quick. And when I came back from that, and I realized, okay, so it starts in digestion. It begins with what we're assimilating and what we're not assimilating, and then it wasn't that much longer later after that. I was in Brandon, Manitoba, and I was doing a talk there, and I was trying to get this point across about diet affects the way you feel. It's not just, we can't just eat Sunrider and expect everything to just deal with itself. You got to also put better food in your body, because there's some foods that really harm your body. And I was kind of had these blank stares and stuff. And I was like, oh, so I turned around and I grabbed a marker, a couple markers, and I kind of drew this out for the very first time. And this diagram that Dr. John Mattson had shown us. And, it probably took me 10 minutes or whatever. And I turned around and I looked, and everybody had their mouths hanging open, and I was like, oh, I'm onto something here. So I started drawing this out, and I found it to be one of the best things I ever did in order to help people realize how food affects their body and how their body works. So Diana, if you could turn the share on. All right. Share content. Technology is so amazing.
Yes.
We
We had
can do
fun
it.
practicing this.
I know. You can still hear me?
Yes.
All right. So this is kind of how it goes. So let's say this is your stomach. And oops. And these are your small intestines, and then you've got a large intestine, something like that. I don't know why I got that spot showing up. Anyways, so if your stomach is healthy, you got lots of stomach acid, and if you got lots of stomach acid, you usually have lots of mucus, and the mucus is there to protect your stomach from the acid. But because of the 9 stomach busters, which are, you guys can help me out here, coffee, regular tea, and even green tea, because it has caffeine in it, and tannic acid, and then we get sugar and salt and chocolate and alcohol, preservatives, artificial sweeteners, and smoking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. prescription drugs is another one that's really tough on digestion. And so even as kids, we start getting our steady flow. We'll get pop, we're getting caffeine and sugar and chocolate, get caffeine there. And it really affects the stomach. And the way the stomach reacts to that is it starts producing less and less stomach acid. And as it produces less and less, Dr. Matson said by age 5, many children already have a weakened stomach. And what happens is when you have less stomach acid, you have less mucus. So you get this little piddly layer of mucus to protect your stomach from the stomach acid. Because why make a whole bunch of mucus if there's a little bit of acid? And then when we eat something acidic, like any of these 9 things here, they irritate the walls of the stomach. So I'll use a different color, use blue. So it irritates the stomach walls. And what happens when the stomach is irritated, it's a muscle and it spasms. So it tightens and it squishes the solution up into the esophagus where there's no mucus, there's no protection. And that's where acid reflux comes from. And we found that there's some people that don't experience acid reflux because they have no nerve endings in their esophagus. But often later, as problems show up and they get a scope and they find it's like World War III has happened in their esophagus. So the same principle applies. And there's a valve in there. I think there's actually 2 valves, but they start getting stretched out of proportion and damaged with scar tissue. So they don't close properly anymore. So then you wind up with this acid running into your throat when you sleep, when you lay down for a while. So anyways, lots of problems. That's the kind of start of it. And what else happens here, I'm going to go back to red, is you wind up with particles of protein being undigested. And it's because you don't have enough acid to break them down. So a simple food like strawberries, you can react to it. It's because of the protein in the strawberry is really hard to break down. And it takes acid to do that. And so you start having food allergies. Now, we absorb our nutrients from our intestines, mainly the small, but also the large, and it goes up through the portal vein into our liver. And then it hits our body through our circulatory system. So I always explain like a food allergy is like a chunk of food that was supposed to be totally broken down, but now it's a chunk and it hits the liver and it's like sucking the corner of the rug into the power head of the vacuum cleaner. And the body does not like that at all. And that can show up as, of course, hives and headaches and shutting down of different body systems. When it can really react to that, it can affect your immune system. So we start having more problems from this poor digestion, but you think, well, what's food sensitivity's got to do with, or food allergies got to do with poor digestion, but that's why. And then we wind up with fermentation. I'll use yellow. So we wind up with fermentation in the large intestine because of all the gook, the fats and undigested protein and just the matter. And of course, the weaker your digestion, the more problems you have with that. And it probably goes hand in hand with the diet also, because if you're having a healthier diet, you're probably having a little more fiber. But also, anyways, you wind up with this fecal matter in here, and there's 78 chemicals that come from this rotting, fermenting food in your colon. And that's gases that burn blue. So, and they're very toxic. So, of course, you know, some of this gas comes out into the atmosphere, but some of it is absorbed up into your liver. So now you wind up with alcohol and formaldehyde and horrifying gases like that circulating through your body. And how do you think you feel when that hits the liver and hits your bloodstream? So if you're ever foggy brained and you start finding yourself walking into rooms, forgetting why you walked in there, and just becoming very forgetful, and headaches and rashes and arthritis. And as the body starts to take that toxicity and stick it in places, it tries to get rid of it, but it also tries to get rid of it in places inside your body. So it starts storing it in fat, and it becomes a very unhealthy place. And another thing that happens here is blue, I guess, is your liver makes bile out of all the toxicity that it collects. It tries to neutralize toxicity, and even the toxicity we absorb through our skin. It winds up in the liver, and the liver is trying to neutralize it, and it turns it into bile, and bile helps us digest our food better and speeds up transit time. But when the liver gets overloaded with toxicity, it starts sending down bile that's hot, and that starts irritating. Oh, so it switched to red here. It starts irritating your gallbladder, and it starts irritating your intestines. And so your intestines, when they get this hot bile, they are irritated. And so if they're irritated, they produce mucus to make space, and mucus makes it slippery. So all of a sudden you have diarrhea. You go, why do I have diarrhea? I don't have the flu. Why am I so loose in the bowels? And eventually that can turn into more serious conditions, duodenum ulcers and colitis and Crohn's and ileitis and spastic bowel and all those horrible conditions, which are also a combination now of your immune system attacking itself. So you really wind up with a mess. And so anyways, back to the liver allowing this toxicity to all slip through the bloodstream. And then the tail end of your, then your kidneys, they pick up uric acid, and they wind up starting to do more work than they were ever intended to do, because then the liver is failing and it's wasting way more toxicity. And then finally, your spleen. Your spleen is your final filter, your whole lymph system, so your lungs and your spleen. And if the spleen starts allowing toxicity to slip by, the spleen kind of regulates your immune system, tells your immune system what to do. You can wind up with your T cells, your fighter cells, attacking your own body. And they can attack muscles and nerves and tendons and bone. And you do not want the T cells on your bad side. And so the way he explained it is there's a nerve, and you have the sheath around the outside, and the T cells will just come through and just chop that off. And when you start having this happening, this is where your autoimmune diseases come from, and degenerative nerve diseases. So your MS and your MD and your Parkinson's disease and maybe your fibromyalgia and several of those. So your body starts attacking itself. And anyways, to kind of simplify this is that it's hard to find a pill that's going to fix this problem, that only the body can fix it. The body created it, and the body has to fix it. And so what I found with working again with Dr. Mattson's theory is, and this kind of happened naturally, and I'm not going to make any claims here, but when people started drinking Calli and Fortune Delight, it replaced coffee and tea and also the Sun Care or Sun Nectar in the US, the sugar, and it started supporting the liver, and it started helping in digestion, and just getting rid of the coffee and tea and the sugar. People started feeling so much better, and their bodies started to work better. So that's what happened with me. So I'm sleeping better, and I come in, and I could have went for a cold beer. It'd been a long, hard day of work at the farm, but the Fortune Delight was right there, so I wound up grabbing that instead. So you're doing two things: you're nourishing your body, plus you're not grabbing for the negative things. And then when you add in the new plus, that really, sorry for my scribble, that really helped with salt and chocolate and alcohol. And I used to smoke a little bit. And so and they actually soak tobacco in sugar water when they cure it. So you're getting a sugar hit there also. so that really makes a big difference to the foods that you're eating. And that's the beauty. If you get on Sunrider and stay on it, it starts creating an environment where your body just naturally starts to feel better and work better. It's because it's not only nourishing your body, but it's also affecting the foods that you eat. And then I added in the Quinary. Oops, that's a terrible way of spelling it. Anyways, the Quinary started to nourish the 5 major systems. So I'm going to change my color here to yellow. And so the Assimilaid, or the AD in Canada, starts building the stomach. And it starts replacing this digestive enzyme, and it starts replacing the mucus, and it starts creating this functional body system again. And as it starts working better, you start digesting your food better. So then there's less, undigested foods. And then the Calli is working on your liver and the circulatory system. But then the LS, which is the life stream, which is part of the Quinary, there's 5 formulas. It starts supporting the circulatory system. And then Conco supports the lymph system, your respiratory system. That's your lungs also. And then alpha 20 starts supporting your immune system. And then PA, or Primogaine, starts nourishing the nervous system. So in a sense, you start reversing the whole process by nourishing the body plus helping change your diet. And of course, there's different levels that you can go to here, because we can add in foods that help clean the colon, and we can, we start making suggestions as far as diet, like wheat and dairy can really slow you down as well. And then we start to fine tune with different Sunrider foods, which can even give you a bigger impact. But that's kind of the gist of the digestion. And Vitadophilus is another really important thing, because it helps replace that friendly bacteria in your large intestine. So it's a fabulous probiotic. So I'm just going to open this up to questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I'll just say I really like this explanation, because that's how I started with digestive problems. And I was getting food sensitivities. And so I never got to it never traveled around to my system to get the more serious things. But it's fascinating how that progression happens. And it's wonderful that Sunrider can reverse that whole thing by nourishing the whole body and by changing our actually eating habits. And I just like to make a point that because Sunrider is a whole food, it does seem to change people's eating habits dramatically and easily. And you just can't do that with a vitamin. I haven't heard of it happening that clearly and obviously. And it's just a wonderful thing that just by eating these foods, you start eating better. It's nice to know maybe, quit dairy or wheat or whatever. But if you're eating enough Sunrider, that'll start happening automatically. And I just had a friend who had that exact thing that Jim was talking about with the acid reflux. And she's had a cough now for years. And she just thought it was, who knows what she thought it was. But she found out, she ended up going to the doctor, and they were thinking of maybe doing an operation or whatever. But anyway, she just started taking a lot of Quinary, and it's cleared that up. Like, it seems like it's not fully regenerated yet. Like she's continuing to take the Quinary. We'll see what happens. But it's interesting that exact case of the acid coming in and causing, for her it was causing a constant cough.
Oh yeah, because what happens in a case like that is the stomach's always being irritated. Mm-hmm. And then it's always producing mucus. And so when you come across people that are always always clearing their throat, chances are that mucus is coming up from their stomach, and it's always there, and it creates the cough, the tickle, and they're always clearing their throat, and then they think it's something else, but it's all from digestion.
And I really love how you explain how, antacids are trying to get rid of the acid, and yet our bodies need the acid.
Yeah, because it becomes everybody's goal to kill the acid.
Mm-hmm.
They think, oh, this acid is killing me, so they're taking all the antacids. Yeah, but the goal is to regenerate the stomach, so then it's got its own protection with the mucus and its own acid, and it can start to function. And sometimes it's hard for people to make the connection that they just need to nourish the body and get rid of the things that are damaging their body. And there's a whole psychological thing that happens here too, is that people tend to think, especially if they grew up with certain foods in their diet, and then they think, well, this is normal. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, no, you got to get rid of the coffee, and you got to get rid of the sugar, and you got to get rid of the chocolate. And they start thinking that there's something wrong with them or something. But most people, I forget, I think it's $10 billion a year spent on antacids worldwide, $10 billion. And I think by 2025, it's supposed to be 15 billion or something. That's the last time I looked at that statistic. So there's a few people out there with heartburn or with acid reflux. And so people think, well, is there something wrong with me? Am I a weak species or something if I have to quit these things? No, it's just something that most people don't talk about. They just take antacids and they think that this is part of life, but it's so much nicer when you don't have to worry about this burning all the time, this inferno that's happening in your esophagus. So
I have a question. Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. You know how you go from, as you get older, something happens and you take LS, and then something happens, and then you go on to PA, and then something happens, and you're still doing a bit of quinary, but then you go into the individual products like PA and LS. And would AD be, let's say you started a new person, would it be the best thing for them to fix their digestive? Because would you say most people have bad digestive problems anyhow without really knowing it, and they should always fix the digestive system so their food gets assimilated better, then they would notice better results?
Well, yes and no. I think, Connie, in the perfect scenario, there's a distributor in the US, and her name is Colleen Seaton. And what she used to do is she'd start people on a 3-month intense program. It would be like 3 Vitadophilus and 3 packages of Quinary, which is 30 capsules a day, and I forget how many New Plus and how many of this or that. So she would go after their stomach like in a vengeance and their body systems. Now, in reality, people want to move into it, with less cost and stuff. So the stomach is one. I'll just mention this, is that when Dr. Mattson was talking to us, and he said that when he was going through medical school, and I forget that one period of time when they have to amputate, or not amputate, they have to cut open dead bodies. There's a name for that, cadavers or whatever. And when they do that research, he said most people, when they died, like let's say they died of a heart attack, when they opened them up, they found out they died of 7, 8, or 9 diseases. It was just the heart attack that killed them. But a lot of them had terrible digestion, and it kind of started there. So in the perfect world, I love the idea of getting them on the, nourish, balance, and cleanse, because it's kind of the whole picture. It's hard to do one without the other. It's hard to run on one leg, right? And the nourish, balance, cleanse does all that. And the Quinary, it's so balancing, and it helps all 5 systems work better. And we don't know sometimes what's going on in the body. We never know. Only the body knows. So when you feed it the Quinary, it starts to create that communication amongst the systems and that regeneration. But sort of make a long answer to this, but if you could, it'd be always great to start them on Vitadophilus and some extra AD. at all if they're showing signs of poor digestion. So you could start them with even 3 or 4 capsules, or 4 ideally for an adult, minimum for Quinary, and then an extra 3 capsules of AD or whatever a day. Would probably be a smart thing to do.
So I guess one last question. Like I was saying before, as you age and you think, oh, I'll try PA for this and LS for that. And next thing you know, you're taking all these capsules of the different things trying to fix, and you're taking a pouch of Quinary besides. So where would the power be to up, like when you find yourself taking too many capsules, would the power be in to take up your Quinary, more power to the Quinary, or more, because after a while you can get to taking all those 5 systems product. You know what I mean?
I would just,
Connie,
Yeah,
I think Jim's going to say the same as me, is definitely the Quinary is the find it and fix it formula. So
Right.
that would be up your Quinary, and that would be the answer, right, Jim?
yeah, that's definitely the answer.
So,
Is to do that.
I
And then-
would,
Go ahead, Randy.
I would agree with that. And just add a little bit more Quinary if you can. And then the only other thing I would ever add would be Vitadophilus. It just, in my experience, it makes so much difference.
You're trying to treat a symptom rather than address the cause. And the cause is always an imbalance in the body. So Quinary is the only one, the only one.
Yay. Thanks, Tricia and Randy and Connie for your question, and for everybody for attending. And I mean, this is so fun. It feels like our meetings were years ago, and we'll just have to do more of these. And Jim, I just love your diagram. It's absolutely incredible. Thank you.
And thank Dr. Mattson for originally showing it to me. And, I will say about the diagram is that, in this business, we tend to talk about duplication. You got to do things that other people can do. But this diagram, when I did it, there was probably a half a dozen of my distributors that did start drawing it out or whatever. But I just finally put it on a video. And it was when you can really impact people with something simple that makes sense, it changes the world is what it winds up doing. So
It does. And we have the solution, which is amazing. And lots of Quinary, and hopefully the basics, New Plus and Calli and Fortune Delight and Sunrider Stevia. So thanks everybody for attending. And thank you again, Jim. This was amazing. We'll see you all probably in June. We'll have another one. Okay.
all right.
Have
Bye,
a great,
everybody.
Diana?
yes. Bye-bye now. Thanks, Randy.
Bye.